Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Ana Clara and today we're going to talk about all of the books I finished reading in February. February was a very strange reading month for me because I started off so strong. I was so cocky because I was like, this is the shortest month of the year and I'm going to read so many books, because in less than 2 weeks I had read 5 books, which is a good amount for me. And then my mental health went like this. It decided that it was going to just dive into the swimming pool of anxious thoughts, and we just never really submerged. So I'm still kind of there, but trying to get back to the surface. So after those 5 first books, I kinda didn't really get into any story. It took me a little bit to get into another book. I also went away in February with my sister. We went on a trip to Orlando and we hit some parks, so I couldn't do really any reading around that time, so that also could have played a part on why I didn't read as much during the halfway mark of the month, but that's unimportant. Today we're going to talk about the books that I did finish reading, which were 7 books. I started off the month with honestly a book that I forgot I read. When I looked back on Goodreads, I was like, oh, how did I forget completely that I read this book? And that is The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. I also had to look up what this book was about because I kind of remembered, but not fully, so I wanted to make sure that I gave the correct synopsis. And here it is. This is a story about 5 women who are selected to be part of this very exclusive writing retreat in upstate New York, which is very cool because that's where my partner is from, so I really enjoyed being in that like cold setting. The author that hosts this retreat is like this very popular and very controversial like feminist icon. And when the women arrive at this house, they find out that as part of this retreat, they have to start and finish a novel from scratch. They're pretty overwhelmed, but like the prize is pretty good because whoever gets their novel selected by this author is going to get a 7-figure deal with a publisher. So that's pretty good, especially if you're trying to make it as a writer. The problem is that after a couple of days, some women start to get either very sick or even begin to die. So this is pretty much where the story takes off. I feel like I remember enjoying my time listening to this book. I feel like we are following a pretty typical and pretty classic trope as far as thrillers go. However, I will say that I feel like the author did a very good job of giving a fresh take in these tropes, because it didn't feel like this was a story I had read before. I still felt like it was unique and compelling in its own way. However, as you can tell, it is not a story that stayed with me for a very long time. Although I can kind of remember the plot twist and I can kind of remember where the story went now that I talked a little bit more about it, it's still not something that I have thought since I finished reading, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I feel like sometimes you just need to listen to a book or to read a book that entertains you, and I feel like that's, for the majority of the time, that's what thrillers tend to do for me. It's not something that I'll think forever for the rest of my life, but it is something that will entertain me and will keep me like focused in the story and will keep me grounded and paying attention to what is going on in this book, which sometimes is all I really need. So this was still a very enjoyable reading experience. It's not life-changing, but it's also not going to keep you bored. I think I gave this book a 3 stars, and yeah, I'm just glad I read it. It was a good audiobook to get me through cleaning my house and doing like boring shit. And yeah, that's all I have to say about The Writing Retreat. Nothing incredible, but also nothing terrible. So pretty good book to distract yourself from life. Hi, sweetie. The next 4 books that I'm going to talk about were all books that I read for my romance reading vlog, which I will link down below. So if you want to watch my in-depth thoughts and reactions to these books, you can definitely check out that video. I really hope you do, because I was actually very happy with how that vlog turned out. So the first book that I finished reading for that vlog was Check and Mate by Ellie Hazelwood. This was my first ever Ellie Hazelwood book. I wasn't sure if I was going to like her books, and I don't think I'm ever actually going to read her first book. I can't remember if it's called Love Theoretically or something else. The Love Hypothesis, I think that's the name of her first book. I don't think I'm ever gonna read that one just because I know this was Reylo fanfiction and I cannot for the life of me ever support those two characters together. So for that reason, I probably will not check out those books. However, with that being said, I am so happy that I read one of her books because I absolutely loved this one. In this book, we are following Mallory, who is this young woman who has really taken on the responsibility of taking care of her whole family, especially because they don't really have a relationship with her father anymore, and her mom deals with chronic pain every single day, so she cannot work as consistently as she once could. And as the oldest sister, Mallory feels like it's her responsibility to step in and help out her family, which she definitely does. However, she's not exactly happy in what she's doing, but she is getting by. She's making a lot of sacrifices. And probably the biggest sacrifice that Mallory has ever had to make has to do with chess. She used to be this chess prodigy when she was a kid. She was so good. She was like on the right track to become one of the best, if not the best chess player in the whole world. However, chess is also very tied to her father, and because something happened in their relationship, playing chess is extremely traumatic and triggering for Mallory, so she has abandoned that part of her life. Even though it made her happy, even though she was extremely good at it, it's not something she has done in years, really. But one day, her best friend convinces her to please play chess in this like charity event with her because she's going to leave for college and this will be one of the last things that they're able to do together before she leaves. At this tournament, she is matched up against the current best chess player in the whole world, who just happens to be extremely hot. He is this guy called Nolan Sawyer, who is tall, and it's known as the like bad boy of chess. But the thing is that during this game, Mallory wins. And after that, it's really impossible for the whole world not to know her name. I loved this book. This is such a cute story. If you just want to read something that is going to put a smile on your face, it's going to make you giggle, it's just sweet and loving and cute, read this book. This book just made me happy. Like, it's all I think I could have asked of this book, and it's really what it did for me. It put a smile on my face, it kept me giggly. I felt like a teenager watching like, I don't know, To All the Boys I Loved Before for the first time. I really loved it. I really liked both of the main characters. I felt like at the same time that their relationship was very compelling and I wanted to see the scenes in which they interacted together. I felt like individually they were also very compelling people and they had like things going on in their lives that did not involve the other, and I feel like they were able to grow beyond the relationship in the story, which I really enjoyed, especially for a YA book. I don't feel like this is something that we see a lot. Not that I'm like an expert in romance books, because honestly, the 5 books that I read this month that were romance were like the most I've read of this genre in like 3 years. So I'm still a baby, an infant when it comes to my romance experience in books, but I loved this one and I felt like it kept me entertained the whole time. I did not want to stop listening to it. I think I finished the book in 2 days, and yeah, I'll definitely be reading more from Ali Hazelwood. I don't think I'm going to read The Love Hypothesis, but I'll probably check out her other releases as well. And next, I finished reading my favorite romance book of all time, which was Happy Place by Emily Henry. I know this is extremely controversial. I know that when this book came out, it was very hit and miss for a lot of readers, but this was absolutely a hit for me. I loved this book. So this is a story of Harriet and Win, who for 8 years were like the perfect couple. They had been together since college and really seemed to be like this match made in heaven. However, when we start the story, they have been broken up for 6 months. But the only problem, aside from the fact that they have broken up, is that they have not told any of their friends yet. They also have this tradition with their friends, which they've had since their college years, that every year during 1 week of the summer, they spend this perfect week in this huge Maine beach house that one of the friends' dad owns. And they've done that for years. It's their tradition. They love doing it, and it's really what connects and grounds this friendship. However, because Harriet and Win have broken up, they have anticipated that this year things are going to start to change, and their plan was that only Harriet would go this year, and she would tell them what happened once she was there, and they would go on from there. However, once Harriet arrives at the house, she is very shocked to see Win standing there. He looks just about as panicked as she does, and she soon finds out that it wasn't his choice to be there. It was actually their friends that begged him to come and surprise her because they think they're doing long distance. Now, the main reason Win agreed to this plan was that their friends also told him that this would be the last summer that they would have at this house, because it turns out the girl's dad is going to sell it after this summer. So all of the memories, everything that they have built in this place will be sold. So essentially, this is the last summer these friends have in this place that means so much to them, and that's why he agreed to come. And because there's already so much sadness surrounding the sale of this house, Harriet and Win don't feel comfortable telling their friends that they have broken up because they feel like they're going to ruin things and make things even more awkward. So they decide to pretend they're together. But they might still have feelings for each other. I loved this book. I found out through this book that some of my favorite tropes in romance stories are the fake dating and the second chance romance. I gave my full thoughts on this book in that vlog, but I absolutely love the way in which Emily Henry explored the relationships within this story, the relationships between Win and Harriet, but also the relationships that they had with all of their friends and how everything that they went through in their personal lives affected the love that they had for each other, but also affected their friends and affected everyone around them. I feel like this book touched really well on grief and personal growth, and when it's necessary for two people that love each other to step away from one another in order for them to grow. I absolutely adored this book. The characters in the story are going to live in my heart forever. I have seen a lot of people complain that they didn't like this book because they felt like it had the miscommunication trope, which again, I talked about on the vlog. I do not agree with that because I feel like even though at its core, this book does have some sort of miscommunication, I don't feel like it is uncalled for. I feel like if I was in the situation that these two characters were in, I wouldn't know how to properly communicate either. So I feel like it was very understandable that they couldn't properly communicate and properly give each other what the other needed. So I loved this book, loved the characters. It was humorous when it had to be humorous. It was deep and loving and sweet when it had to be all of those things. It made me laugh, it made me cry, and I gave it 5 stars if you can't already tell. Oh, I'm horrible at telling you guys my star ratings. I gave Check and Mate 4 stars. Next, I read The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, and unfortunately, I did not like this book. Now, this is the story of Clementine, who is this woman who has recently lost her favorite person in the whole world, her aunt. She has inherited her aunt's apartment, and she has been trying to get by in New York City. She's been trying to grow at her job and become extremely successful, both because she wants that growth for herself, but also because she wants to keep as busy as possible so that she doesn't have to deal with the loss that she has just had. However, the thing about her aunt's apartment is that she's not like other girls, because this apartment has some magical abilities. And essentially what happens is that at any given time, this apartment can send you back in time, and it always sends you back 7 years. There's no real explanation as to why the apartment does that. You kind of just accept it as part of the plot. It's not really important how the magical system works in this book, because aside from the apartment, everything else takes place in like the normal world. Because of this ability that the apartment has, one day Clementine is taking a nap and she wakes up and there's this random good-looking man inside of her apartment. And it could be that he is in the right place at the wrong time, because they meet, they have feelings for each other, they really enjoy each other's companies. However, she is meeting the version of himself of 7 years in the past. So she's not sure if she's ever going to be able to see the version of him in her present, if that makes sense. Unfortunately, this book felt very cringy to me. I didn't really like the writing style. I didn't really like the amount of references to pop culture that this book had. I realized that it is extremely hypocritical of me to have enjoyed Check and Mate as much as I did and not this one, because Ellie Hazelwood is known for her pop culture references, but I felt like in Ellie Hazelwood's story, it felt like it was well integrated within the plot, whereas with this one, it just felt so cringy, and it just felt like the author was trying to be like super relatable by including those references, and it just, I don't know, it just did not work for me. I did not like it. I didn't really care for the relationship between the main characters. I felt like they were the only thing that mattered in the story, which is valid in a romance book, but what I've come to understand about myself, especially this month of reading as many romance books as I did, is that I need other things and other characters to matter. Not just as much, but to matter more in the story than the side characters in this one did. I didn't feel like anyone other than the two main characters felt like real people. I didn't feel like their storylines really mattered, because the only thing that the author wanted us to care about was the two main characters. I cannot even remember what the name of the guy was, because I don't care. Maybe his name was Adam or something like that. I truly do not know, because I don't care. I just didn't really care for their relationship. I felt like it felt like insta love. Like they cared so much for one another, and they felt like the other person understood them better than anyone else in the world, but we were never shown how that love fostered and how that love existed. I don't know, I feel like this is a bit of a controversial opinion, because this book was so popular last year towards the end of the year, and it just didn't work for me. I'm sorry, I didn't like it. I don't think I'm going to read any more books from this author, because I just didn't like the writing and it just made me cringe, so there's that. I gave it 2 stars. Next, I read the last book that I read for that vlog, which was 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This is a beautifully written book. It is a story about 2 authors, Eva and Shane, who met when they were teenagers, but they were both dealing with a lot of trauma and a lot of complicated things back then. So they kind of like fed off each other and brought out both the worst and the best in each other. They spent 7 days together, 7 days in June, but their time together ended pretty tragically, and somehow they have managed to never cross paths again as adults, even though they are both authors, and even though they have sort of been like communicating through their stories throughout their whole careers. However, that's about to change, because during a literary event, their paths cross again. And this literary event just happens to be in June, and they're going to have 7 days again together to work through everything that happened that one summer. This is a very, very beautifully written book. This book also feels a lot heavier than all of the other books that I have talked about so far, because it tackles a lot more traumatic experiences, especially when it comes to overcoming addiction and like sexual abuse as well. So definitely check trigger warnings for this one because it does tackle more difficult themes than the other ones that I have discussed. It is beautifully written. You can feel the love that the two characters have for each other in these pages. I also feel like this book really portrays like growth and accountability and kindness and forgiveness so well. It's definitely a more like mature book, but it's also very funny when it needs to be, and the author's voice is very light as well, so it doesn't always feel like you're dealing with as much heaviness as you are because of the author's voice, if that makes sense. I really enjoyed this book. It's beautifully written. It's a love story that is going to stay with me forever. It brought tears to my eyes, especially the last line in this book, and yeah, highly recommend. I gave this one 4.5 stars. Next, because apparently this author has me on the palm of my hands, I read Book Lovers by Emily Henry. It got a little bit damaged because this was being thrown around in my backpack while I was traveling with my sister. But this is the story of Nora and Charlie, who are sort of like work enemies. They're not exactly enemies because they don't hate each other, but every encounter they have had at work has not been like the sweetest or like the cutest, but they're extremely similar. They're both hard workers and they're very dedicated and very much like no bullshit kind of people. They are extremely successful and good at what they do, and I really like how much of like a workaholic Nora is and Charlie is as well. They're both city people. They want to succeed. They want to be the best at what they do, and they absolutely kind of are. They kind of like really slay at their jobs. But Nora has a younger sister called Libby, who is like pretty much the love of her life. This woman has worked her whole life to provide for her younger sister because they lost their mom when they were so young. And because she loves her sister so much and she desperately wants to connect with her in any way that she can, she agrees to go with her sister on this vacation to this very remote location. They go to this like middle of nowhere town in North Carolina called Sunshine Falls, and Nora is like a city person. She doesn't really love being in the middle of nowhere, but Libby is excited, Libby is happy, so she is happy, and she just wants to like bond with her sister again because she feels like as they've grown older, their bond is not the same. So she agrees. She says, yes, let's go on this weird vacation. However, the last person that Nora was expecting to find in this small town was Charlie. But somehow he's there, and somehow she keeps crossing paths with him. And maybe this city woman is about to have a small town romance. Who knows? I really enjoyed this book. I feel like I saw so much of myself in Nora, not in the workaholic, successful slave businesswoman that she is, I wish, but not in that sense, but the way that she is with her sister and the sense of responsibility and how much of a control freak she is. I feel like I am like that as well. And I feel like this book came to my life at the right time. I feel like I needed to encounter a character like Nora in order to let go of some of the like tension that I was holding on to. So it was kind of healing to read this book, not because of the love story, but because of Nora's own personal growth, which I think is my favorite thing about Emily Henry. I love how she is able to create these love stories that are so sweet and compelling and that you cheer for, but at the same time, she is able to create such complex characters that have their own individual journeys that they need to go on in order to allow this love into their lives. And I feel like that's what happened to Nora. It's almost like her own personal journey matters more than the relationship. It's kind of like Charlie will wait, but you gotta work on you, girl. kind of a thing. I really, really enjoyed this. I loved Charlie as a character. I felt like he was complex, he was mysterious, he was a little sexy, and I really, really enjoyed it. I loved their banter, their conversation, but most of all, I loved Nora's own personal growth and the things that she had to go through in order to become the best version of herself, and also how she had to learn how to adapt the relationship that she had with her sister from what she wished she was to the reality of what it actually is, if that makes any sense at all. I also gave this 5 stars, so Emily Henry, you have my heart. And lastly, I read Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan, which is a tiny, tiny, tiny book that became very popular, I feel like last year, especially after Jack Edwards talked so much about it. This is a novella that takes place in this small Irish town in 1985. We are following this family man called Bill in the weeks leading up to Christmas, and early one morning he is making a delivery to a local convent and he sees something that really stays with him. And it really forces him to confront his past and the secrets and silences of a town that is heavily controlled by the church. This is a very, very powerful little book. It's almost like a slice of life sort of literature. You're kind of just following this man's head as he both expresses the amount of love and pride that he has for his family, but also the anguish that he feels with the unanswered questions that he has from his childhood, and all the ways in which he wants to help and make a better society. It's really about the small things that we can do to make this world a better place, and it's something you can read in one sitting. I listened to the audiobook just because I kind of felt like experiencing this book through audio, because the narrator has an Irish accent. And that's what I did. I listened to this while I cleaned the house, and I really, really enjoyed it. It's short, but it's powerful. And yeah, I gave it like 4 stars. So those were all of the books that I finished reading in February. I feel like I had a pretty good reading month overall. Even though my mental health has not been doing the greatest this month, my books kept me company, and that's all I can ask of them. So thank you so much if you watched this video until the end. Thank you for being here. Please consider subscribing to my channel and liking this video. Also, leave me a comment telling me what is either a book you think I should read, especially if it's a romance, because I'm starting to dip my toes into that genre, but also what was your favorite book that you read in February. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you on my next video. Bye bye.